During the creation of the earth was amassed together. The uh, the mass, everything floating in space that was at the distance from the sun as the earth is now, kind of stuck together as it all orbited around the sun, but it was the same density or the material. So there was this large swath of material that accumulated into the earth. So it slowly grew in size, and things started to stick to it, because the more mass you have, the more gravity plays a part. In other words, a larger object attracts smaller objects to it in what's called gravity. So all this material accumulated around in this round ball that we now call the earth. All this material continued to grow until all the material was collected together into this giant ball that we now call the earth. And all of it was now at this distance from the sun was accumulated into the earth and the moon. How the moon was formed, we don't care. That was some other time after this ball or mass was here. That's some other theory. So back to the earth. We have the earth and we have all this material that has accumulated. So now the heaviest of items in this mass of earth is moving around within the ball. And this is mainly just a theory of how the earth evolved. And you'll see why I'm saying this at the end of the video, because I think this is how it formed. So the materials was accumulated, but the iron and heavy metals continued to kind of be oblongish and just exist, but it didn't really. There was a lot of it, and when it accumulated in the Earth's volume and its mass, it was not at the center, it was scattered about. So therefore it was not centered. Therefore the Earth was the center of gravity was not in the middle, it was about. So the Earth was shifting, the Earth's surface, the inner core, the whole thing was it had no core. The whole Earth was shifting about as it rotated around the sun, and since it tilts on its axis, it may have not even tilted at all. It may have gone close to the sun and then back out away from the sun for whatever reason. And so that means the sun is pulling on it, moving stuff around. So with these things moving around within the earth, the stuff is shifting, and there's earthquakes, and it's mixed in. There's lots of water and ice and sand and metal, silicon, and the whole mass of what is in the earth today was all separate. It was a mix. And so as it continued to rotate around the sun, things started to move around a little bit. And then the center started to heat up because there's more things in the middle. So if it steamed up and got above 200 degrees, 212, that causes the things to shift around even more. So it causes more shifting when you have heat and steam that's moving stuff around. So as it shifts around, the iron ends up being in the middle because things are shifting, and that's where it's migrating to the middle. It did not have to be in the middle in the beginning. It could have been over here on the side of the earth whenever the earth formed. At that point, it would then be migrating towards the center of the earth. So, and this is only theory again. So, all the metals slowly migrated to the middle of the earth. And as it did, especially if it got hot enough, like over the temperature of boiling of water, that means that it would allow steam to form and pressure, which pushes things around. If you have as big as the earth is, you could have encapsulated earth with heated water in the middle of the earth and then steam forming. So I can imagine gigantic steam chutes through the surface of the earth, coming out to the surface of the earth, were these giant steam vents. And they would blow steam out the surface of the earth, all the way around the earth. And as that happened, more earth fell in to fill in where the water was, because there would be big steam events, and then the earth would move around and it would fall inward. And so it would further fall inward, and any metal would fall inward. And as it reached the core, it would then heat up as well. So you have the iron and nickel going towards the center of the earth, which is what I read. The AI said that the center of the core of the earth is iron and nickel, but what I'm doing is theorizing how did that happen? And so how did we get to where we are today? And how did the gold end up being spread through the surface? That's the goal of this. So all of the iron ends up falling into the center. You have it heating up even more as it continues to rotate around the sun. And there's something called the iron catastrophe, where all the iron in the earth, a very violent age of the earth, when all the iron fell to the center. And I'm trying to imagine this. So again, the steam vents were everywhere, because we're talking the hot soil, hot earth, and the core, just enough iron and metal and nickel to be in the center of the earth to generate enough heat in order to create steam, and not even in the center. It could have been anywhere on earth. And then it migrated to the center of the earth from the sheer heat and pressure of the gravity of it. And I'm imagining earthquakes around the globe continuous earthquakes within 1, 2, 10, 15, 100 miles, everything being earthquaked as the heat and the steam is boiling from the core of the earth. And it's pushing up all the water, pushing out the water, and all the metals are flowing into the center of the earth as water steam vents outward. So all the metal falls inward, all the steam is blown. All the metals fall inward while all the steam is blown outward. So there is a replacement of the water within the earth's surface. And so as the earthquakes continue, the steam is blowing out. So let's say the section of the earth has iron and gold and minerals all inside of it. And there's an earthquake that shifts, and the the water gets down there where the hot earth is, and it expands the water at an extremely high pressure, and then it from the heat of it, it turns into steam and shoves any minerals, gold and sand and silica, up through the earth from the sheer pressure of it. And I'm guessing it is above the melting temperature of gold, which melts somewhere around 2,000 degrees. So if the core of the earth is about 10,000 degrees, or getting up there, that means that when the earth's core was about 2,000 degrees, and all that iron was nickel accumulating, and it was just beginning to get up to 2,000 degrees, that's about the time when all the gold and steam was being blown out the surface of the earth. So it started out as being cold, no temperature at all. The iron, through earthquakes and steam, migrated into the middle, because now it's above 200 degrees. And then as the temperature rose, steam continued to get blown out of the surface of the earth. So there's steam vents everywhere once the core of the earth reached 200 degrees. And continued, and as earthquakes took place, more iron got into the core of the earth, which then now it's increasing to like 500 degrees, and then more steam is being blown out the surface of the earth, and then it's continuing to get more iron and nickel and more metals and uranium and rock into the center of the earth. And now it's like 1,000 degrees, but it's still below the melting temperature of gold, so it's still not there yet. So as you get more iron and nickel accumulating through earthquakes, and more steam blowing out the surface of the earth, and more heavy metals are sinking towards the core, and the pressure, the sheer mass of earth around the earth is sealing up the escape of the water and steam. It's growing in temperature and pressure. So then it gets up to about 2,000 degrees. It still has 8,000 more degrees to go. So at 2,000 degrees in the very center, it's now reached the melting temperature of gold. And so the steam and water is also at 2,000 degrees, because you can have water under pressure at 800, 1,000, 2,000, even 3,000 psi at 2,000 or 3,000 degrees. So the steam can be the temperature. The dry steam of water can be at whatever the current temperature is. If you add water steam to 2,000 degrees, it is 2,000 degrees. So you would now have the center core of the earth pressured up at 2,000 degrees, pushing steam, and guess what? If the steam is 2,000 degrees, you've almost reached the melting point of gold. So therefore, anything that is at the melting temperature that the steam is coming up, guess what? It's carrying that metal with it. So you now have steam traveling upward at 3,000 degrees, because now the core is continuing to heat up through earthquakes, more metals following to the center of the earth. It was a very violent time period when all the iron in the core ended up falling to the center of the earth. So now it's at 2,500 degrees in the core of the earth, as all the iron and nickel is falling to the center. And there's still water scattered throughout the surface of the earth. So at 2,500 degrees, you now have the surface of the earth sealed up from all the earthquakes and whatnot, and now the pressure can get high enough that the water in the surface can now be pressured up and still be 2,000 or 3,000 degrees. So now it's reached 3,000 degrees in the center of the earth, and now, oh, there's an earthquake. Oh, now water saturated soil has now come in contact with 3,000 degrees. So now the water expands at 3,000 degrees into steam. It comes traveling up from the core of the earth, and at 3,000 degrees it's melting minerals and gold along with it as it travels upward. It then blows out the surface of the earth, but it cooled along the way. So as the steam cooled, it carried minerals with it, cooled. Those minerals solidified because they were liquid. And then the water cools and becomes liquid again and deposits out the gold within the crust and the soils. So this continued and continued. So as the center core of the earth continued to rise in temperature, there's more iron accumulating in the core. So what does this do? This expands from the center core. And it could have been the iron was way over there on the other side of the earth, which means this side of the earth has less iron or more iron, but cooler and more moisture, and so therefore the steam was larger on this side. And so it blew the steam up through the cracks and crevices of the earth at 2 or 3, 4,000 degrees because the temperature of the core is growing. So then as the core grows in temperature, remember it's 10,000 degrees now. So as the temperature of the core grew, the size of the core grew and continued to grow outward. As it grew outward, it continued to heat up water and soil, and it blew steam out the surface, again reaching 2,000 and 3,000 degrees, carrying the minerals with it as it blew out the surface of the earth. And it carried these molten minerals with it, often depositing the gold into quartz and other crevices and rocks and basic sand or soil. Wherever the steam came up through, that's where it carried the gold and other minerals from the core of the earth as it went up to 10,000 degrees that it is today. So the growing of the core of the earth pushed the minerals through steam. Steam is a carrier of all the minerals that we have throughout the core, throughout the surface of the earth, from the core to the surface. Steam is what carried the gold and minerals through to the surface of the earth. And it was during that time period of the iron catastrophe that all the gold that was either in the core or throughout the surface was carried up through the steam. So you could have gold in between the core and the surface, and then as soon as the hotter steam, 4,000, 5,000 degrees, blew up through there, it would have melted the gold and other minerals as it went up through it, and then deposited further up closer to the surface. It could have even gone completely to the surface at that temperature if you had like a volcano, or if you had like a molten magma from the center, because then the earth was volcanic later. it would have carried that gold up to the surface. So that's when I think all the gold was deposited into what we have, aside from volcanoes. That's how I believe all the gold in the earth from the core to the surface was deposited. And that's why I wanted to make this video, is because I feel like I needed to understand that the theory behind that iron catastrophe and what effect it had on gold being deposited, and how did that happen. So I did read through chemicals. There aren't any chemicals that were available at the time to actually dissolve the gold. There wasn't any nitric acid because oxygen wasn't there in abundance yet. There wasn't any sulfuric acid because it wasn't there yet. The only thing that it could have been had to be steam. Hot steam of 1,000 degrees from the core, pushing the metals and minerals up through to the surface of the earth. And you can click a little subscribe on the bottom right hand corner if you want to.